Wow, so we're already pandering to Texas and Oklahoma. Great.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're dapping it up this Friday with the Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend. Hope everyone had a very happy 4th. So we're talking about a potentially explosive SEC media days. Maybe fireworks are going to be put on by a few Auburn players in 2024. We'll discuss that. But first, a list came out earlier this week, and due to the holiday, it's taken us a minute to get to it, Darrell. But we're already pandering to Texas and Oklahoma. And Auburn and Alabama are feeling the brunt of it already, which I think is ridiculous. Earlier this week, Will Backus, who we praised Will Backus last week, a writer for CBS Sports, he ranked all of the SEC rivalries, Darrell. And, you know, sometimes you'll see the Iron Bowl not be first when folks talk about national rivalries because they want to talk about Ohio State and Michigan, which I've experienced both firsthand. I don't think they're close, but whatever. But ranking the SEC, now with Oklahoma and Texas, he says the Red River Rivalry is a better rivalry than the Iron Bowl.
Well, this is a perfect time for a little DAP rant. And I hate to do this around Independence Day, but I kind of feel like the Founding Fathers did when they penned that document. What is he thinking? What in the crap is he thinking? So here's the first point that bothers me. Already there's this natural arrogance, mostly from Texas, not so much Oklahoma, that they're going to come into the SEC and immediately upgrade the whole conference and championships. And look, the SEC was great. I understand it's going to be enhanced by the additions of Texas and Oklahoma, but it was great before the Longhorns and Sooners came in, and it would be great after, even if they didn't. Okay, so that arrogance, first of all, needs to be addressed. I'm sick of it. Second of all, how do you have a rivalry that's not even been played in the SEC yet be deemed the best rivalry in the SEC? It's stupid. I wouldn't even put Texas and Oklahoma in the top 5 in the nation, never mind the SEC. And I can make a point for that. But the Iron Bowl is the best rivalry in the conference, bar none. And it's top 2 in the country alongside Ohio State, Michigan, in my opinion. Anytime you play a rivalry inside a conference, when it's not in the same state and it's not the last game played of the year, those two things immediately to me are 2 strikes against you. Texas and Oklahoma doesn't have to go to church with, work with, marry, date people from the other side, typically, because they're not even in the same state. They don't see each other unless they meet at the freaking state fair where this game's played, okay? That's a joke. And it's played in what, October? Woo! Big rivalry in October. When it gets cold and there's a chill in the air in November, that's when rivalries matter, baby. Not in October when the leaves haven't even turned brown, okay? That's stupid. And then I would put the Egg Bowl for pure hatred and rivalry. I'd put that in front of the Red River Rivalry. And I'll even go a step further. Texas being involved in a rivalry, their best rival isn't even Oklahoma. People can talk about the Red River Rivalry, but the amount of hate that I've seen towards A&M and insecurity and shade and just especially with the Schlossnagel thing with stealing your baseball coach.
Good point.
Texas and Texas A&M, to me, is a bigger rivalry that hasn't been played for years than this is because they're in the same state and hate each other, fighting over oil money and, all the things that Texas has to offer, the state of Texas, the Lone Star State. It's a joke. I'd put it 4th or 5th in the conference and not even top 5 in the country. I think Florida State, Ohio State, Michigan, Auburn, Alabama, and some other rivalries like that are much bigger than Oklahoma, Texas. This list needs to be reconsidered.
Yeah, the big angle that you just discussed is, okay, you're sitting around Thanksgiving with your family knowing that the Iron Bowl is a few days later. There's nothing else comparable to that. Nothing, except for maybe the Egg Bowl because it's usually played even closer to
it gets you primed. That's the thing. On Thanksgiving Day, it gets you excited. It starts to prime the pump. that you're watching the Egg Bowl and that idiot lifting his leg in the end zone a couple years ago after scoring a touchdown, and is Lane Kiffin going to Auburn or not, and he gets smoked by Mississippi State.
Right.
Those storylines get you primed for what happens 2 days later. And I guess the best way to do this is you could just step outside the state of Alabama and go to any other state and take a poll and say, hey, you have 3 hours to watch a football game the rest of your life. Do you choose Auburn, Alabama, or Oklahoma, Texas? And I guarantee you, people are tuned into the drama of the Iron Bowl and the history and some of the great things that have happened. It's not just an in-state thing that I have blinders on over this. Nationally, this rivalry is perceived, again, when you play it and who you have to deal with the next freaking 364 days matter. And if you're not in state amongst each other, I think it takes away some glitter.
Yeah. I mean, I married into an Ohio State family, and I've watched and been a part of that rivalry. You know, we watched their game first and we watched the Iron Bowl after, and it's just not the same thing. It's just not the same thing. They don't have anybody in their family that went to Michigan. Right. I've got a bunch of people in my family that either grew up Alabama fans. Not many Alabama fans go to Alabama, as we all know, but they grew up Alabama fans. So we'll
let me make one other point.
Go ahead.
To your point, when you get done watching Ohio State, Michigan on a Saturday, and I have some family up in Columbus, and let's say you're an Ohio State fan and Michigan has ripped your heart out. When you go back to work on Monday in Columbus, Ohio, are you going to run into a Michigan fan? No. When you go to Cleveland or Cincinnati or whoever in Ohio you may pull for Ohio State, when you go, no. And the same thing with Ann Arbor. When you go back to work in Detroit or Ann Arbor after Ohio State, you don't see anybody.
And you can say the same about Texas and Oklahoma. No question.
Yep, exactly.
No question. It's not the same thing. Auburn and Alabama, the Iron Bowl is the best rivalry, not only in the SEC, but also all of college football. And if you want to say all of sports, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to argue with you at all. But Will Backus, I think he's really good at what he does. He was very fair to Auburn last week when he did the over-unders and predictions. He has Auburn going 8-4, but I think he's off on this one. We'll see. We will see. Okay, there's going to be several explosive players, or at least the potential to be several explosive players. We all saw fireworks last night. Who can be making the fireworks happen on the field? That's discussed next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula that helps champions win championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. Darrell, you use eBay Motors. I've used eBay Motors. It's so easy to use. You hop onto ebaymotors.com. You submit what kind of vehicle, make, and model that you have. And then it really just says, hey, here's everything that fits your car, and it's all guaranteed.
I use them at work with our company fleet, and I use them personally for my personal vehicles. So that tells you, and I'm not very mechanically inclined, so that's what makes it very easy to find a part I need.
Yep, absolutely. eBay guaranteed fit. Your part's guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's stay with the topic of, we've all saw fireworks. What kind of explosive offense could we see, or explosive performances could we see for the Auburn Tigers in 2024? Let's go through the top 5 players that we think are going to score the most touchdowns for Auburn, non-passing. If Peyton Thorne doesn't lead Auburn in total touchdowns, there's a problem, probably, or somebody took his job. So we're taking the passing equation out of it. So Jarquez Hunter, you and I both think Jarquez Hunter will lead the way for Auburn in total touchdowns in 2024.
Absolutely. A couple different ways to do that: on the ground and through the air. And I think he's a guy that's been utilized as a receiver out of the backfield. So yes. And I think inside the 5-yard line, when Auburn's not going to throw the football, he's your man to give the ball to score touchdowns. And that's why I think he leads the team.
Yeah. Number 2, we have Rivaldo Fairweather. And obviously I think his overall production is going to go up, but I think his production in the red zone is going to be a major, major factor, especially if Cam Coleman draws the type of attention that we think he could. Absolutely. I mean, we talk about those fades to Coleman and Thompson and some of those guys, but if those are taken away, Fairweather, big body, we've already seen that he can catch the ball
inside the red zone for touchdowns. Peyton Thorne goes to him, feels comfortable with him. In year 2, I think he gets a lot of touchdowns in the red zone.
Yep. Yeah. Third one is where it got a little tricky for me. We both agreed, though, at the end of the day, we think Thorne, just purely with his legs in the red zone, is going to add some touchdowns over the course of the season.
Very underrated attribute of his. He's very good on the ground. If they start to key on Hunter or whoever's in it at running back inside the 5, the read option, you pull it and you walk in. And so I think Thorne's going to get his share of touchdowns inside the red zone as they start to crash or double, focus on defensive linemen crashing on Hunter or Cobb or Alston, who's ever in the backfield. That's where he has an opportunity to pull it and get it and walk in.
Yeah, so Jarquez, Hunter leading the way, Rivaldo Fairweather at 2, Peyton Thorne at 3. Then we have Cam Coleman. And look, there's a chance that Cam Coleman is number 1 on this. Like there's a chance, but I think this is still going to be a run-heavy offense when it's all said and done. And so we've got Cam Coleman at 4, but there is a chance that he's way higher than this.
He's the only one in the 5 that I have that I think gets a lot of his touchdowns outside the red zone. He's capable of scoring from anywhere on the field. And so he's your guy. When you think of all these other ones, we're thinking once Auburn gets inside the 10 or 15, I think of Coleman outside of the red zone, outside of the hashes, what I've seen at the spring game, deep balls over the top from 50 yards out, catching it in space and tail lights, right, and taking it to the house. He's the only dude I have in this list that I think gets it outside the 30 and 40-yard line as well.
Yeah, Rivaldo's got a shot. Jarquez Hunter always has a shot to break one. But then you and I disagreed on number 5. I have Damari Alston. You have Jeremiah Cobb, which is going to be interesting to see. And we've talked about this a ton. Like, who is that next back behind Jarquez Hunter?
I think Alston, if it was purely based upon touches on the ground, handoffs,
sure,
I would lean towards Alston. But I think that Jeremiah Cobb gets put into the offense on those jet sweeps, which are actually a pass when they pitch it, from the quarterback position. He's got some danger there. And then also more catching the ball out of the backfield like Hunter. I think those 2 elements of his game, not to say that Alston can't, I just think they've shown in the past, even as a freshman, they love running him on that little toss jet sweep and then throwing to him on that wheel route. I think that's why Cobb will be 5 for me.
I think that makes sense. I think to me, it's going to be a total touches thing, because I think if Damari gets enough touches on the ground, more than Cobb, then that'll be the case. But there is this discussion that Cobb is going to kind of take Damari as the number 2 back. We just don't know yet. Damari's good. Jeremiah Cobb's good. What a great problem that this coaching staff has to figure out as far as figuring out, okay, who's going to carry the football for us for the running back position after Jarquez Hunter. But yeah, both of those guys, I think they both have a chance to be top 5 in total touchdowns for Auburn this season. It was really hard to not put Robert Lewis on this list. I don't like him not being on here.
Absolutely. I was just going to make that point. Out of the slot position inside the 15, I could see a scenario where you mentioned before where people double Coleman, or if Fairweather starts to eat, they start to shade towards him and Coleman, which is going to leave the slot position between the hashes inside the 10 or 15 one-on-one with Lewis, where I think he can eat. So he's somebody that could jump into the top 5 easily, and I would not be shocked at all.
Yeah. Keandre Lambert-Smith did not come up in our conversation. Why do you think that is, Darrell?
Well, I think, that's a good point too. He's somebody that could creep into the top 5 as an outside guy. Who do you go to from the outside when you're inside the red zone, or when you're trying to take the top off downfield? I think Coleman will be option number 1, but KLS could obviously be that go-to guy like he was early in the first 7 games for Penn State. And he's another guy that he jumps even in the top 4 would not shock me at all. The great point about all this, how nice to have 6 options to discuss and argue over. Well, not argue, but push back on, where it goes down to 5, 6, 7 dudes that could jump in the top 5. I love it. It goes to show you have weapons now.
No kidding. And there's so many other guys that if they figure out their way in this offense where they could, like, if Perry Thompson puts it all together quicker than the average freshman does, which we're all kind of expecting him to, he could totally find a role and be in this top 5. I'm trying to think of other dark horses that could, I don't think Camden Brown's role is going to be large enough for him to be in this conversation. I think he's a part of the offense, Darrell. I just don't think he's going to get enough targets to be in this top 5. And I'm trying to think of other guys that like, what if Brendan Fraser just becomes this like,
You're killing me.
Sorry, go ahead. Who do you think could be a dark horse?
I did not think that you were going to pull. I was going to go, Zach, I've got somebody to shock you. I'm shocking you with this. Brandon Frazier could be a dark horse because of his size and how to utilize him inside the 10. And then you said Brandon Frazier. So there you go. I thought I was going to pull the wool over your eyes. Just because of his size and maybe utilizing him inside the 10, we've identified 8 guys that we're not surprised at all going to Austin, Smith, and all the way down to Brown. Right. Frazier's another guy that, again, would be my dark horse. Does Auburn get inside the 10-yard line and throw that little flat pass to him? Good. You know what I'm talking about, where he catches it at the 3, and then who's going to try to square up with a 6'8" dude that he just carries into the end zone?
Oh, if he's attached to the line, and then let's say you've got Rivaldo at slot, and he's running either to the back of the end zone or to the left of the field, and then you've got Cam Coleman maybe running a fade, and it's like, okay, if they're in man, there's nobody over there, and maybe Frazier gets lost in the mix, and you just kind of dump it off to him and let him run it in. That could totally happen.
It's like that tight end drag where he hides at the line of scrimmage, right? He fake, and then he sneaks out amongst the massive humanity right there at the line of scrimmage, and you throw it to him at the 2. Even if he's not in open space, which I suspect he would be, if there's a corner or a safety that comes up to take him on, curtains, he walks into the end zone. So, yes, anybody that thinks me and you discussed some of this ahead of time, that right there is proof positive we don't, because we had the same dude, but we were mind-melting each other there.
We're so in sync. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like crazy. Justin Timberlake. I'm sorry. That was a horrible dad joke, and I apologize.
You feel good about it, though? You feel good?
As soon as it came out of my mouth, I wanted to take it back.
Oh, it's out there now. I'm not editing that out. I'm leaving it.
All right.
I'm leaving it. All right, yeah, so those are our top 5. Hunter, Rivaldo, Thorne, Coleman. You've got Cobb at 5. I have Damari at 5, and we mentioned several honorable mentions.
Yes.
Let us know down below or on Twitter if you want to reach out to us who your top 5 touchdown earners will be for the Tigers taking out passing. So just receiving and rushing touchdowns. Staying on the topic of explosive, since it is, we're in the middle of fireworks season. What could be some explosive storylines around SEC Media Days? We discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. They've got killer last-minute deals, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee, and they take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and, of course, tickets all over the place. Somebody in the Locked On Auburn Discord reached out to me yesterday saying that they just bought some concert. I think it was Zach Bryan concert tickets through the Game Time app, and they got the discount code and all that. It's so easy to use, Darrell.
It is. I've used them for pretty much every aspect of entertainment, sports, a lot of baseball, but I've used them for concerts, and I know you've used them for theater or for concerts and theater. There's theater tickets you can get there. Anything you could think about wanting to go get entertained, go to Game Time first. They've got it all right there. One-stop shop on your app.
Yep, no question about it. So be sure to check out our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed, and use that promo code LOCKEDONCollege. There's so many fun storylines heading into SEC Media Days, but obviously from the Auburn perspective, what I think is going to happen is what we're already starting to see a little bit of. We mentioned Will Backus earlier in the show. Last week he put out, the article where, hey, you take the over on the 7.5 wins for the Auburn Tigers, because I think more and more people throughout the national media or the SEC media are actually sitting down and looking at the potential schedule for all, or not potential, the actual schedule and potential outcomes for all of these teams. And they get to Auburn and they say, oh, wait, Auburn can win a lot of these games. And all of a sudden, I think there's going to be more hype around Auburn being an 8 or a 9 win team versus the conversation about them being a 6 or a 7 win team even a month ago.
Yeah, and that's great. And Hugh Freeze is kind of exerting that confidence when he talks about, the On3 guys had an interview with him yesterday, and he talked about what he expects in year 2. And last year it was more preaching patience, and this year there seems to be a little bit more of a enthusiasm, optimism tied in with the top 5 recruiting class that he thinks they're going to be closer to, with what year 2 could look like. And you mentioned that 9 wins thing, and that's so important. I mean, you and Jake Crane talked about it a couple episodes back about what does 9 wins do for Auburn. I think that my explosive take, which I'll mention in a moment, the 9 wins barometer, the 9 wins demarcation line is huge. It's huge. And people may not realize how big it is, but it's really, really big, even on a national level.
Well, 9 wins is huge. One, because it's 3 more than a year ago. I mean, you talk about progress. Holy cow. But then it also, to me, it makes that bowl game matter more, because if you win your bowl game, then it's like you're in a situation to win 10. We saw that in 2019, I think.
Lost to Minnesota. Yeah.
Minnesota whooped us. Yeah. I mean, that was, we made that look difficult. But it puts you in that situation where it's like, oh my goodness, you got a chance to have a 10-win season, and all of a sudden the hype around your program just explodes, pun intended. Fireworks go off. Happy Independence Day.
Here's my fireworks towards that. As we go into SEC Media Days, people always complain and wring their hands about the favoritism the SEC gets, and people that are outside the SEC. And I don't even care that Texas and Oklahoma are in the conference. It doesn't add to the legitimacy of the conference. There's a gentleman named Kelly Ford at K Ford Ratings, to credit him, that came out with a very, very interesting graphic that would raise the question, your favorite college football team, how many games minimum do they have to win to be in the college football playoff conversation? And it's tiered, and it starts at 9 and goes all the way to 12. Well, lo and behold, Auburn, along with Alabama.
It goes from 8 to 13.
Yeah, 8 to 13. I'm sorry. But the one that I focused on was 9 and 10, because that's where the majority of the SEC teams were bunched.
Sure.
Teams like Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn were in the 9-win category. That's a lot of respect. Now, of course, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Oklahoma was in there too. But what they're saying is if Auburn wins 9 games, they're in the playoff conversation, as opposed to Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas having to win one more game at 10 to even be in the college football playoff conversation. I love that they put Auburn right here at 9, because I think 9 wins is, in this conference, something that would get you in that conversation. Now, it's interesting because Auburn's schedule is not as tough as it normally is. Yeah. So I would have thought they would have had to say you had to go to 10, but the right 9 wins has you in the playoff conversation. I think that's explosive as heck as you go into SEC Media Days.
Yeah, and within this graphic, he's got it ordered by, within those 9 wins, the 9 wins of Georgia, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma, Kentucky, Alabama. I'm going through all the SEC teams. Kentucky, Alabama, South Carolina would be a more impressive 9 wins than if Auburn were to win 9 wins. And to me, it's like there's so many variables that go into that, though. It's like, what if Auburn beats Missouri on the road and Alabama on the road within those 9 wins, right? Like, how can you quantify that? So some of this, I'm like, I don't fully get it. But all in all, the fact of the matter is, if Auburn wins 9 games, they're in the conversation. Do I think Auburn wins 9 games? No, but I do think they'll have the opportunity when November rolls around, and that's all you can ask for.
If Auburn has 9 wins and they drop a couple they shouldn't, but in those 9 wins, Georgia and Alabama are in those 2 of those 9 wins, arguably 2 of the best wins that anybody would ever get in any part of the country. Sure. Nobody would have 2 better wins, arguably, than Auburn if they were to beat Georgia and Alabama as part of those 9 wins. I'm not saying that would happen. I guess I get the argument that he feels like Auburn goes 9-3 and loses to Missouri, Georgia, and Alabama. But still, those 9 wins would be enough to have them in the college football playoff conversation because of the quality of losses offsetting those 9 wins as well.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, would it be better for you to lose to Oklahoma but beat Missouri on the road?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
because then you can look and say, okay, well, that's a quality win. That'll be a top 10, top 15 team. You beat them on the road. You got something on your resume. But yeah, I mean, I think 9 wins is possible. I think you need some things to go your way, and you really need a few position groups that are big question marks, to execute and perform at a high level. But we've seen that before. So
I think that at the bare minimum, to get to 9 wins, you have to win that Oklahoma game and start off 5-0. In order to get to 9 wins, starting 5-0, in my opinion, is paramount. And that means beating Oklahoma. You come out of that 5-game stretch 5-0, you got a fighter's chance to get to 9 wins.
I just think the overall energy around the program would be so high too. The thing that stinks is if you go 5-0, the bulk of your fan base won't see you again for another month.
Oh, but they'd have the Red River Rivalry to watch in freaking October. Whoop-de-doo. Right? I mean, yay! We can go to the state fair and watch that game, but our team is on the road for longer than a national convention. I mean, that's the problem. Yeah, that's so weird, but that proves my point. October, I know that Tennessee and Alabama play the 3rd Saturday of October. Auburn used to traditionally play LSU in October, but that rivalries, to go back to my other point, you don't get to see Auburn for a month, but we get to watch Oklahoma, Texas. Strike up the band.
Sure. Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Dap6410 on X, Darrell Dap on Instagram, and then look forward to every Wednesday and Friday hanging out with you, my friend.
Yes, hope everybody had a safe holiday. We'll be back with more content later today. Like the video, please subscribe. We'll see you when we see you. This has been Locked On Auburn.